Everyone, it's Doug from the Point of Sale Data Minute podcast with another live broadcast here on LinkedIn and YouTube. Today, we're going to talk about retailer replenishment systems and the challenges that those pose to brands when they leave money on the table that they don't even know about. Joining me today is my monthly guest, Scott Kennedy. Scott is my data guru friend and monthly co-host here on the Point of Sale Data Minute. Let's bring Scott onto the stream.
Doug, how you doing?
Scott, thanks for joining me today. You never get away without a cheer. Now, Scott and I have talked about this topic before, and we find it fascinating. I do anyway. And Scott is the first person I've talked to in the point of sale or in the data space that has actually found a solution to this problem where sales or inventory can drop off from a retailer replenishment system. And the brand doesn't even see this happening. Now, in my experience at krunchbox, we have a component of our system that's able to isolate these products that have dropped off store shelves, not getting replenished by the retailer replenishment system. In fact, I looked at a customer today before the call as we were doing some prep, and I found that in their Home Depot stores, their best-selling item that retails for around $100, they are no longer in 151 stores. So if you take their average rate of sale of one, we're talking about a $750,000 plus problem that they don't even know exists.
Right. They're just confused that their replenishment orders are starting to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And they're just like, well, I guess the demand's slowing down, not realizing they could have done something about it.
Yeah, they don't see it, right? As we talk, I think we'll get into some of the details here, and to set this up for everyone, Scott's written an article. We're going to host that article on my company's website, krunchbox.com, or my employer's website, krunchbox.com. It's been kind enough to post it there. There's lots of components to it. It's driven by Power BI, some Power Query stuff. So Scott's going to help inform and educate all of those analysts that are going to watch this video or listen to the talk track today about how they can find these sales opportunities that are slowly being eroded across their brand. Of course, the krunchbox system can help you with that as well. But what we want to talk about is kind of why this happens. And why don't we just kind of start there?
Yeah, sure. So a brand might be running a promotion or not, doesn't really matter, but you have a demand shock. For a certain part of the country, those stores sell through their products extremely fast. And then you have a period of time, could be a week, could be multiple weeks, where you have a zero sales history. And the way replenishment systems work is they're working off of predictive models that are attempting to look ahead in the future and say, like, how much demand do we think we're going to have before we go and place a replen order with the brand. Well, unfortunately, when you go out of stock, a lot of times the replen systems, predictive models will dampen ultimately until you get all the way to zero. And by the way, this isn't just a retail thing. This is an Amazon thing. It's an everybody thing.
Exactly.
And and then you're stuck in this situation where they're no longer meeting like the minimum requirement to get that particular store that had been out of stock back on the replen cadence. So it sounds pretty simple, but you got to remember that these systems are working on an absolutely massive scale. So a few stores for your particular brand may not necessarily be sounding the fire alarm over at the retailer's headquarters.
Yeah, I agree. I had a customer I was working with in Lowe's, and they're in the kind of small appliance area. And during the COVID period, when they had all kinds of supply chain challenges as they bring components together globally and assemble in the US and Canada, their best-selling unit wasn't available for a period of over 12 weeks. And it wasn't until like 20 weeks in that the analysts realized that Lowe's never reordered.
Right.
The rate of sale goes to zero. Stores are already out of stock because they didn't have enough inventory and everything's gone down to zero. But there's nothing to ship until they got it in. But the replen system says, hey, for the last 8 weeks, I haven't sold any.
Yep.
My rate of sale is nothing. What do I need? I need nothing.
Right.
And it's only if you have a system that you can pick up these anomalies in the data. And to your point, like these files that you get, and it isn't just one retailer, it happens in every retailer. They're thousands and thousands of lines long. Well,
Yep.
there's an analyst out there that's going to go, geez, line 35,612 this week should be there and it's missing.
Right. Right. Add to the complexity that, like, when these COVID demand shocks were happening, brands were attempting to substitute in other products as a means to keep the shelves full. So you've got to balance, like, hey, I'm manually keeping up with this substituted item. Eventually you get back in stock with the other item. Like, how are the retailer systems, how do they understand which one they should be ordering? So
Yeah,
it's a complex issue.
That's a great point. We use that. I use that example all the time, right? You have a simple example. I got a red water bottle and a blue water bottle. Well, red's my best seller. It's out of stock.
Right.
Sales of blue pick up. Walmart goes, hey, I need more blue water bottles. Sales have gone through the roof.
Right.
More blue, less red. And it's
Right.
just a false shock to the
Right.
system just based on product availability, not really based on pure demand.
Right.
But that replenishment system is just such a big machine. It's not going to adjust itself and go, let me go take the rate of sale for what happened last year at this time, not the last 12 weeks in most cases, right?
Yeah, your red blue water bottle example. Here's another slight twist on that, where for whatever reason, a retailer might do a price match to something online, a competitor, anything really, and they bring the price significantly down. Sales go through the roof. The replen system tries to buy over and over and over again. So then the brand is sitting there with all these cans. So that's a totally different topic, but hopefully brands are capturing the orders that they can't fulfill as a means to have some perspective on the next year whenever they're planning the next forecast. But anyways, you have that huge demand curve that takes off. And when you're looking at it the next year, you're like, wow, that blue water bottle blew up. We should forecast that triple, not realizing that it was actually driven from a an inaccurate price matching situation. Clearly, I'm thinking about online and in store and how they interact with each other right now. But that's the quintessential example that I've seen happen time and time again as well.
Yeah. I think it's important too to set the ground that a lot of these challenges happen because the retailer data suppresses zeros, right? So if you have zero sales, and you have zero inventory, and you have zero on order, and zero in transit over a period of time, that data just doesn't get delivered to your file anymore because they're looking to, reduce the size of their database, deliver more manageable files. And that is part of the challenge. It's not an analyst's fault that they don't see it. It's that you can't see it because the data just disappears.
Right. And on one hand, at first when I was thinking about this problem, I thought, this is due to the fact that when retailers are having their portals crawled by these third-party companies, they're essentially just running reports, and I get why they would suppress zeros in that instance. And I think, maybe when everybody switches over to APIs, it'll be different. But the same reality exists that the IT departments at these retailers don't want to give you more data than they need to, because ultimately, that's a compounding stress on their system that their IT division is trying to eliminate. So either way we pull the data, whether it's old school or new school, you're still going to have the same issue of having zeros suppressed.
Yeah. And like I said, and that's where the erosion starts to happen. You can't action what you don't see. It's just, there's no game plan for this unless you have something like you build or something like I have access to a krunchbox. It helps brands identify these product store combinations that they no longer, for whatever reason, carry the product but should be carrying the product.
Right.
How have you dealt with phantom inventory at the same time? Because that can happen as well. You end up with 5 units in stock, but you have zero rate of sale forever and ever because those 5 units don't exist.
Yeah, phantom inventory is a totally different ball of wax. Identifying it, yes, there are lots of very forward-thinking machine learning models that you can build to identify anomalistic trends, which appear as phantom inventory scenarios. Personally, I haven't cracked the code on how you actually correct the problem. Part of the reason may be that I play in more of an OPP price market, So the cost of sending people out to go fix these things for $20 whatevers may not rationalize well internally. But I mean, maybe somebody who's selling TVs or other things like that might have a better perspective on it. But it's definitely still a problem, but not a lot of good answers on how to fix it.
Yeah, I agree. It is challenging. Whether you know it, it's the size of the problem kind of determines the action required.
Right. Totally.
All right, let's get into your article a little bit. That was a good segue, I think, into just kind of explaining the problem in general. As I said, we'll host Scott's article. There's some data sets that you can request so that you can see how all the components that he's put together here, which are quite fascinating from my level of knowledge in the data world. This is some pretty cool stuff. So do you want to walk through kind of your thought process of how you came up with this and what you explored, and then we'll just, at the end, we'll wrap up and we'll leave a link to the actual article and the where they can get the data set to play with.
Yeah, so I'm going to summarize it a bit. If you want the full detail, if you want the file, like you can get all that stuff from either Doug or filling some form out on the website. But I teach a lot of analysts how to tackle problems. And one of the first things we always think about when we're about to pull some data is I usually ask, what's the universe of data that we need to be thinking about? Right? Because if we're joining in subsequent tables as we go along, if we were missing an item number or store number or something from that initial universe of data that we wanted to collect, any subsequent join is going to naturally have records that just fall off because you were not capturing the full assortment right off the bat or the full store master file. So what I tend to do in scenarios like this article is talking about is you have to create like the total possible store to item relationship. So depending on what tool you're using, you essentially have to say, well, what are all my stores and what are all the items that I sell? And you have to, it's called a cross join in SQL where you actually multiply them together. And you get this really, 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 really big long list of all possible combinations of all 200 items or 10, however many you have, multiplied by how many stores you have. Then from that point, anything you join in from that point on, you're guaranteed for it to have a match. And then once you get all the way down to the last step, you can get rid of all the stuff that may not be relevant to the particular analysis you're running. This type of stuff 10 years ago might not have been very easy to do, but you can do it in a ton of different systems now. And in the example in the article, I explained how to do it in Power BI, and I purposely stayed away from SQL programming, and I did it almost all of it exclusively in Power BI, which you can download for free and try it out yourself if you want.
Yeah, and I think even a lot of brands just struggle because we'll ask for this. We'll kind of ask for, what's your product, your planogram file or your ranging file. Like you got to start with a good data set. So at the outset, you got to know, should this product be available in this store?
Yeah.
And for a lot of brands, that is still more challenging than you think.
Right. So once you've built that full history and you've started to join in some sales history to your data, like what the total possible combinations could have been. Maybe a store item combination happened in week 1, and then another combination happened in week 3, and then another combination happened in week 8. You need to pull all that together and build that master file that you reference thereafter. Then you'll be able to say, okay, I know that this item store combination was a hit. I can see that there were some sales in the past, and there no longer are any sales going forward. You can look for those scenarios in your data to recommend as something you either look deeper into or you're able to send off to your retailer.
Yeah. In your experience, how of digging into this, have you found that retailers are fairly receptive to filling these gaps? The merchant teams at the retailer are managing so many thousands of products and big categories with lots of velocity. They don't have time to get into this level of detail. Have you found that they're more than willing, or how would they want to get this kind of wrapped up for them to action? Have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, I would say with COVID, this quote unquote like black swan event, no replenishment system is going to be able to handle some of the curveballs that were thrown at it recently. So, I mean, I've seen as much as 10 to 15% of our total business at times be files that were hand delivered over to the analyst who is then going to script orders against that recommendation. Doesn't always happen that way, but I think everybody's aware of the fact that we have a lot of variables going on, and we don't necessarily trust the way our demand curves look in the past. So really, it just boils down to understanding what replen systems are good at. Like if you've never had an out of stock and you have fairly normalized sales, they're all hitting seasonality patterns as they thought they were. They're hitting their holidays correctly. You're not price matching, and about 10 other things that all happen as they were supposed to. Then yeah, they'll do a pretty good job. But in the minute things get out of whack, you have to be able to dig in on this level to make a strong argument back to your replen analyst why you need to have a particular inventory amount scripted out to a cluster of stores somewhere.
Right. Yeah, it is hundreds of thousands of dollars are left on the table by most brands, I think, every year by not fully understanding where the slippage is or having a tool or a process in place where they can identify the slippage. And
right.
As I said, this was my most popular 1-minute video of last year. It's like you're losing sales, you don't even know it. Because I think people, you begin to wonder, you think your product's in that store, and I encourage everyone to go in and check. Because again, in the samples I looked at before our call today, there's another customer, their top selling items, not in like 126 Walmart stores now. Like it slowly erodes. It's not like a light switch, right? It doesn't just happen. It's because of the replan, because of inventory and shipments and all the other challenges that happen in the supply chain. It just happens over time.
Yeah. In the article, I outlined like a hypothetical example, just a very simple math problem that you can do on the back of a napkin if you want, where take a hypothetical item count times whatever that store count is, which you probably know off the top of your head roughly what it should be, times the average weekly quantity sold, however many retailers that you're selling this at, and then whatever the ASP is, and you'll see that number start to grow exponentially around missed sales. So the numbers, Doug, that you've told me in the past, like they're pretty big. In my example, I'm working off of a $14.99 ASP. When you get into the 50, 60, over $100 range, like it explodes. So just pull out a calculator and do some simple math, and you can figure out if it's worth your time to look into it further.
Yeah, one of the products I looked at today was a $5 price point, right? Still equaled 60 grand for the year. Now they got 200. They have 250 items in the retailer. Yeah, so that's 60 for one. The next one I looked at, their number 2 seller was 80, so that's 140 from 2. Yeah. Like how much money are we leaving on the table, right?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been great today, Scott. Thanks again for joining. Another great article. Again, we'll get this to you. I'm trying to embed the link into the broadcast here so everyone can have easy access to it. By all means, you can reach out to myself or Scott. I would love to help you, figure out at your company how much money you're leaving on the table. That's an easy 30-second process for us in our krunchbox system. But more importantly, I think it's great that we've been able to inform folks that this is happening. A lot of them, in my experience, aren't necessarily aware of it, don't know where to start. So I'm really happy that you've been able to provide them with some advice and guidance, and we can share those details so that they can begin to see kind of what the level of impact is on their business. So thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Doug.
All right. We'll be back next month with Scott when he does another article. And I just want to thank everyone for hanging in for another Point of Sale Data Minute live broadcast today. This will be turned into a podcast on the Point of Sale Data Guy podcast channel. So you'll be able to listen to it in your car, etc. And again, thanks for hanging out, watching another video. Hope you enjoy it. And